Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firms podcast, brought to you by big4accountingfirms.com and the Big Four Accounting Firms YouTube channel. Before we get started, just wanted to remind everybody to support us if you have a chance or if you can. Even $1 helps, and we have a link in the description to a website called Buy Me a Coffee. It's just a way to donate to us and support us. Again, any amount is helpful so that we can keep putting out content. And there's also other ways for you to support us in the show notes to this podcast or on YouTube in the description. In today's podcast, I wanted to discuss something about KPMG. Accounting Today ran an article last week that 80% of companies are reporting SDGs in their financial statements. And this SDG stands for Sustainable Development Goals established by the UN. And we've talked about this in previous podcasts when we discussed ESG reporting and how that is growing in the Big Four accounting firms. And this only proves that it's growing because Accounting Today wrote about it in an article, and what they really focused on was a study that KPMG published. And there's just more evidence of it now with this KPMG report, and they have multiple partners in KPMG and groups working on putting this report together for a reason, because it's part of their business. It's growing, and they tried to make it seem like it's this independent report. But what the report was getting at was that companies need third-party assurance on these numbers. In other words, they need KPMG to come in and audit them. And they publish this report to show how big of an expert they are in this area. But another thing you have to remember is that groups and organizations coming up with these environmental financial reporting standards are funded by corporations and large government organizations influenced by large corporations. And these standards oftentimes help large businesses. So, of course, more large businesses are going to report on them, because these financial reporting standards and just complying with environmental standards puts pressure on smaller businesses that might not be able to use the same materials or safeguards that large organizations can arbitrarily establish and use themselves. For example, if there's a new plastic or a biodegradable thing that a large corporation uses across the board, a smaller corporation might not be able to pay the price or implement it across their whole business. And as we've said in previous podcasts, this area is only going to grow as climate change culture in society grows. And large corporations will only put more influence on these organizations, these climate change organizations, to establish stricter rules to force out competition. Because if you establish more standards that small businesses can't comply with, then you're going to win out. So it took a while for large corporations to get on board with this because they didn't see an angle where they can make money. But now they've all gotten together and they've established it, and it's becoming more important. Obviously, businesses are making it seem like they're doing it out of the kindness of their heart. But if the largest businesses around the world, over 80%, are complying with this now, there's something else up here. So let's go over some of the statistics that were in this report. One of the biggest statistics was that 80% of companies worldwide are now reporting on sustainability. Another one is 90% of companies in North America report on sustainability. So that's a lot of companies in North America that include these measures in there. And there's also another interesting stat that 100% of top companies in Japan and Mexico report on sustainability. 40% of companies now acknowledge the financial risks of climate change in their reporting. Another one is that a majority of companies worldwide now have targets in place to reduce their carbon emissions. And if you remember, KPMG themselves even recently committed to being carbon neutral, and they were the last Big Four accounting firm to do so. Another item in this report is that third-party assurance of sustainability information in corporate reporting is now a common business practice. And the reason KPMG is saying this is because they want people to hire them to audit these releases, this information, the financial statements that they're putting in there. KPMG also said that GRI remains the dominant global standard for sustainability reporting. And GRI stands for Global Reporting Initiative. And of course, GRI will tell you how to use their standards if you pay them to tell you. And the industry that leads in disclosure of biodiversity is the mining industry. And this makes sense since they have the potential to impact the environment the most. And the last thing that I wanted to discuss is that North America companies are leading the way in acknowledging climate risks in financial reporting. So that's the update for today. As you can see, the ESG standards and these global metrics are becoming more and more important. Bigger companies are beginning to use them and adopt them as they figure out how they can use them to their benefit. If you're going to work in the Big Four accounting firms, this is potentially another area you have to learn or that you can specialize in. To get future updates, make sure to subscribe to this podcast. And if you can, financially support us through the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes to this podcast. If you can't do that, just subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video on there. Thanks for listening.